Hello and welcome to the pilot episode for Namaste Y'all. I am Stephanie Boyce and I will be your host. I want to take time to give you a little backstory about what the purpose of the podcast is. So let's start with who I am. I am a career educator, and in my work, I have dedicated my life to combating issues of social justice for students, especially marginalized students and in communities of color. And that is the life's work and the focus that I've been focused on for years. And so here more recently, I have been navigating a healing journey and finding myself in a place where I am ready to share how I've been navigating my growth, my progress, but more importantly, to share with you all the beauty that I've been finding on this journey to self-love. And so Namaste Y'all is literally a millennial's journey to finding self-love. And so I offer to you in my business, The Fresh Classroom, it's my work. Namaste Y'all is my ministry. And so I thank you for joining to listen to this pilot episode. I've been so excited about this opportunity. And honestly, if I could be vulnerable, a little trepidatious about sharing some of the things that I've been navigating. And so for official description, I'd like to say that Namaste Y'all is my offering to a world that is running fast and losing sight of love and community. It's the antithesis of grind culture's call to do more, earn more, and get more things and look outside of ourselves for worth and value. It's a call to return home, home to our bodies, home to nature, home to rest, home to pleasure, and home to being. And I'm so excited that you'll be joining me for this journey. At the age of 36, I found myself starting individual therapy. And I was going primarily to dive into some issues that related to my mother wound and some work I needed to do with the relationship with my mom. And it's kind of like if you've ever really committed to individual therapy, it's like if you start to pull a thread like on your clothes and you're like, oh, I got a little thread right there. Like when you pull it, it will start to unravel a lot of things if you continue to pull it. And that's how individual therapy impacted my life. It caused me to slow down. I had been participating in grind culture my whole life. I had been the student leader in school. I had been, an athlete. I had done all the things in a sorority in college and checked off the boxes, graduate from college in 4 years, do all of these things. And I'd like to say that we were raised to think as millennials that we could check the boxes off on this list of external things, achievements, goals, and they would deem us worthy enough to inherit a life of happiness and joy and peace. And I think what a lot of us have discovered is that the more we are looking outside of ourselves and chasing and pursuing and grinding, the more exhausted, depleted, and unhappy we are becoming collectively. And so I'd like to say on Beyonce's internet, there are tons of podcasts, but I'd like to find this space as a place where we're not going to pretend like we have all the answers. We're not going to stand in judgment of each other. We're not going to say things that are clickbait so that we get some traction. I believe my tribe will find me. My tribe consists of people who, instead of twerking on a yacht, would rather be at a wellness retreat, in the desert, at a spa, or taking a class to set intentions and get intentional about things in our lives. And so, Namaste, y'all. Of course, Namaste is the recognition that there's the divine in all of us, and the divine in me sees the divine in you. I like to call that forward with people. But I put the y'all on there because we also on this journey and we keeping it real. Like on this podcast, in my life with my friends and my family, I think there's this idea that we have, right? Where we like to put people in categories. Is that a good person or a bad person? Is that an enlightened person or a ratchet person? And the truth is, when we try to constrict ourselves to those binaries, we may always find out that people will be falling short of what we think they should be. And so I like to say, Namaste, y'all. That's my recognition that the divine in me sees the divine in you, and God created us all, and that we all have this worth and this value in this world. That's what Namaste means to me. And then y'all is my recognition that, like, I'm still from where I'm from. Don't try me. I'm on a journey. You see what I mean? But you can still, I'm working on being enlightened. But if you come at me the wrong way, I'm still Namaste, y'all. You see what I mean? And so that's what this podcast is about. It's about asking the big questions, having these conversations that set us on a trajectory to healing, to finding self-love, and also the recognition that in the meantime, it's a lifelong journey and nobody's going to be perfect. Nobody's ever going to be fully healed. Nobody's ever going to have all the answers. And so when I listen to some podcasts and people are taking a judgmental or authoritarian approach to content creation, it's problematic for me because, one, I know life has this way of humbling you. By the time you get on the podcast, and we've seen these people, let's say like a relationship expert that comes on their podcast and they're like, y'all need to do this. And if you want a good man, you need to do that. And I'm a good man and my wife and da-da-da-da. And then news breaks and they've been cheating on their wife all the time. And you like, your whole platform is discredited. I think it is high time for us to consider all of us on a journey together. None of us, no matter how many followers we have and clicks we get, has the answers. And that as long as you living, like the old folks say, keep living, you're going to learn that everything you think you know is relative and that we're all growing together. And so when I think about my journey to self-love, the truth is, I like to say there was no curriculum. All the things that we studied in school, y'all think about it. And I'm talking like all the way from like K through 12. And then I went to college, undergrad, master's, PhD. Nobody offered us a course on how to take care of ourselves. Nobody offered a course on self-love, on how to make sure you prioritize yourself in this lifetime. Everything was about what our bodies can produce for a capitalistic society, right? Everything was about how much we could achieve, how much we could produce, how much we can give. And I like to think that this podcast will be a place that serves as a curriculum for other people, other millennials, sure. But when I think primarily, I think about my daughter. And if I had to give her a masterclass on self-love, that's what this podcast is. It might just be one season. It may be a podcast that lasts forever. But what I know is, starting today, I want to create what I consider a curriculum on self-love. That as my daughter gets older, she can understand in all that we do to cultivate community, to give back to society, to fight for social justice, all these other things that we could do outside of ourselves, we're only going to be as good as we are to ourselves first. And nobody taught us that. You know, I was like, who taught us that? How were we supposed to know? And so what happened is, at the age of 36, I ended up divorced and rebuilding my life. And if you've ever gone down that journey, you know that it shifts you. It shifts your foundation, and it shakes up things in a way that you have to reconsider. So for me, I was in therapy weekly. I like to say on my socials all the time, I have invested thousands of dollars in therapy and my healing because it was necessary for me to redefine what is it that I believe. Where am I going from here? How do I rebuild my life? What have I been told and made to believe is true? And what has been man-made expectations forced on me that I have just taken on, and all of these deeper questions. And so what I want to do in this podcast is share with you some of the books. I as a researcher, I just dove into books about love. And so each episode, I am going to, well, let me say almost each episode. There might be some episodes where I don't. I am going to be featuring a book that kind of embodies the theme of that episode, right? And so one of the books that has been like core foundational content for me as I've been rebuilding and working through my healing is Marianne Williamson's A Return to Love. when I tell y'all that this book was transformational for me in my journey, this is the author that, if you've seen the movie about Coach Carter, has that one quote that says, "Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure." That quote, that came from this book and this author. So I wanted to be sure each episode, I'm going to be sharing a book. If you ever have read a book that you really loved, especially nonfiction books, particularly, when you get to the end, there's usually a bibliography where the author is going to make mention of all the works they've mentioned as you read the book, right? I want you to consider this podcast as the bibliography for the book that I'm writing, entitled Namaste Y'all. The authors that I'm going to refer to in the book, the authors that have enlightened me, given me so many aha moments on my journey in these last couple of years, I want to give credit where credit is due to their work. I want to encourage you to, if there's a theme that we're exploring, to lean into considering reading that book. And I don't think that takes away in any way from the book that I'm going to write, or the other authors that dive into those themes as well. But this is my offering to you. If you're on a healing journey, I'm going to recommend that you approach it like we would an academic course. What are the things that I need to address in my life? What are the areas that I'm falling short on? What are the aspects that I need to intentionally set some time, energy, and effort towards in order to become the best version of myself? And so my journey has included reconsidering my relationship with religion. Everything about self-love, community love and care, all of these things. And so a part of Namaste Y'all is going to be that I mention these books thematically. Another part of it will be that we will also be hosting curated community events, things that encourage people in general, but specifically Black women, for historical reasons that we'll dive into in the podcast, to break away from grind culture and be intentional about our self-care. I've gone to my fair share of women's empowerment events, and most of them are about business and hustling and how we can be about the business of making more money and securing the bag and all of these things. And I'm not knocking it. There's a place for that. But what this platform is about is also holding space for, as much as we have to hustle, grind, we have to first prioritize ourselves. Self-love requires that we show up for ourselves in deep and meaningful ways. And so I'm going to encourage you to do that by the podcast conversations, the guests that I'll have on, and them sharing their journeys, but also the community events that we'll curate together, where we'll show up and hold space, and allow for rest, allow for restorative conversations, for breath work, for meditation, for prayer, for holding space for each other, to take a collective break, a collective exhale. We need space for that too. And so that's what Namaste Y'all is all about. So I thank you for joining me for this journey. I hope something I said made sense today. I really wanted to be unscripted and just share my heart with you. And hopefully you'll join me when we dive into season 1 of Namaste Y'all. Take care of yourself. So one of the first books that I had to highlight in this curriculum on self-love is A Return to Love by Marianne Williamson. One of the biggest ideas that I really had to reckon with coming out of reading this book is this idea that in life there are two forces. There's love or there's fear, right? And so Marianne Williamson does an excellent job of detailing how every choice that we make, every decision in life, we're either choosing love or we're choosing fear, right? And so fear is kind of the antithesis of love, not hate, fear. Fear fuels our ego, right? So anytime we have a decision, let's say there's a decision we have to make relationally. Let's say a friend has not called us back, or we feel like they didn't show up for us in a moment and we had an important event or something like that. In the moment, we get to choose. Do I choose love in this circumstance, or do I choose fear? And our egos are the biggest driver of our fear-making decisions. And so this has been a big point of reckoning for me as I have worked through my healing journey. Now, does choosing love mean giving people unlimited access to your heart and your mind and body, your energy? Absolutely not. You can still have boundaries around how you move with people and move with them in love. But at the same time, there was this reckoning that I had to have about how often we make egoic decisions. And so, like I said at the beginning, I think we're on a journey, right? So it's okay to have grace with ourselves because we have been in the practice, most of us, of making these egoic decisions more than not, right? And also a lot of it, the culture celebrates. Like when you think about how people move these days, I mean, even these conversations that I hate about, should women and men be 50-50 splitting bills and like all these toxic conversations, I'm always looking at what's the root of the conversation, right? So let's just take it to this conversation. For those of y'all unfamiliar, there's a lot of ranting on the internet, especially amongst these like Black relationship podcasters about should men and women be splitting bills 50-50, all this conversations that other groups of people don't even have that I've seen ever. But that's neither here nor there. And so when you come down to the core of people's arguments, my mind is now always processing. It depends on the reason. If the reason why you're saying y'all are going 50-50 is because something that's rooted in when they give their reasons, a ego-based decision, then that's probably not rooted in love, right? So you hear a man that's like, well, if I got to go to work, she got to go to work because how you going to sit up and da-da-da? It's like, ooh, yeah, it's giving ego. Because only one person in the equation is going to be able to produce life and bring forth a child. It's not 50-50 when it comes to that, right? But if there's a situation and a man says, well, in my current place where I am financially, it may be 50-50 because we're building this thing, we have this plan, blah, blah, blah. But my ultimate goal would be that if I could, as the man, provide for my wife 100%, like that would be my goal. Right now we're here, we're working towards here. Maybe by next year we're at this, you know what I mean? It's like, is it an extension of love or is it an extension of your ego? And I would like to encourage people on a healing journey to start to ask yourself these questions when you make decisions for yourself. But also as you are interacting with people and watching how they make decisions, right? I'm starting to notice now that I'm in this practice when I do, there's times where I do make a decision or I say a thing. And then when I have time to step back and reflect on it, I'm like, now, why would you say that? Like, that was not loving. That was definitely your ego flexed on somebody like real hard. And then immediately be about the process of addressing it. And I think that's where the grace is. The grace is in the middle, right? It acknowledges that we're human and we're going to make mistakes and we're going to have these egoic flare-ups. And at the same time, love conquers all. And when the Bible, for people that are Christians, talks about love, God is love. It's like, I think we think about this in an abstract way, but I'm starting to think about it more concretely. God is love, right? My objective is to be godly because I believe that God created all of us and we all have the divine in us. And so the objective is to be loving. My religion is love. And so when I look at any situation, how I've handled somebody, how I've dealt with the conflict, I'm always looking at, have I chose love or have I chosen fear? Fear is at the root of me letting my ego go out of control. Fear is at the root of me allowing my anxiety to drive a decision. Fear is at the root of me viewing things from a deficit perspective as opposed to an abundance perspective. All of these things that create low vibrational energy in us, it's all rooted in fear. And so a big part of this journey for me that I hope will help you as you learn to love yourself better and then deal with other people more lovingly is to just think in any moment. Because for me, y'all, I'm going to be honest, like it's a moment in every situation when you're about to choose violence where it's like you have to choose. You know what I'm saying? Like somebody texts you something spicy and like right at that moment, like you like, like you popping it off. And before you hit send, it's a moment. You see what I'm saying? And usually I will say it out loud. I'll be like, I'm choosing violence right before I do it too and pop it off. But it's that moment, right? It's that moment where you be like, you can just delete it and be like, all right, you got it. Or hey, namaste. Do your thing, man. You know what I mean? It's that moment, y'all. And so in my journey of enlightenment it's been this integration of my breath work, my taking meaningful pauses before I respond and pop off, and like all of these things to just really be mindful of. Am I choosing love in this moment? Even if that means self-love is going to lead me to create a boundary with someone, I can do that in a loving way. I can say, you know what, that actually doesn't work for me. And if that's what you have to offer, or if that's what you feel like in this moment, like, I understand, like, go in peace. And that's still choosing love over emasculating somebody or gutting them like a fish with your words, or like all the things you could do if you let your ego rage out of control. But what I see now, especially on the internet and with a lot of people's platforms, is this egoic spewing that's happening all around the internet, and people like to click it and like it and say yeah, because their egos identify with that. But the function of the ego is to keep us lonely, and vibrating low, and never reaching our full potential. Only love can get us to that. And so I encourage you today, as you get ready to go about your day, to start thinking in your mind, as you encounter people, as you make decisions, as you decide whether you'll choose violence or not in a moment, to pause and consider, will I choose love or fear in this moment? And let that guide you. Namaste, y'all. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Namaste, y'all. If you haven't already, be sure that you follow us wherever you get your social media fixes. And also make sure you check out our upcoming community events, because we want to connect with you, not just in the virtual space, but in person. I look forward to hearing from you soon. Namaste, y'all.